Southwest Fire Academy was established in 2015 as a response to the recognized need for quality, safe, and affordable fire and rescue training in Ontario. This is not your average fire college. SFA has high standards for their students, and it is their mission to teach and produce qualified, ambitious firefighters who are prepared to work hard to serve their communities. This is not a diploma mill. This is where you can learn strategic, aggressive firefighting from passionate, intelligent instructors who never forget why they were made to do this job. SFA is an accredited private career college that is regulated by the Ministry of Training, colleges, and universities, with a memorandum of understanding with the Office of the Fire Marshal. This means that SFA is an approved training provider with the OFM, and the programs are recognized in Ontario. Check out their pre-service and expanding selection of course offerings at southwestfireacademy.ca. Hello everyone. Welcome to episode 101 of Multiple Calls. I'm Scott Hewlett. The most important fundamental in firefighting is nervous system regulation. A tuned Halligan is useless if your body and mind are tuned out. Whether your employer is supportive of your well-being or not, you need to take ownership and accountability for your longevity in this job. EFAPs, peer support teams, and wellness programs are great. But you have to make the effort to learn about how your body and mind work and what actions they respond positively to, so you can gear up and gear down when required. You live in the information age and ignorance is a choice. Start with this episode, Google body-based therapies, and find something that changes the game so you can stay in it. Here's my chat with Joey Scrivani. Hey Joey.
Hey man, how's it going?
Good, you?
Good.
You got a nice little spot outside.
Yeah.
Awesome. Where are you at?
I'm in Panama City Beach, Florida. It's funny, I was just listening to your latest podcast with, I think his name was Eric Wheaton. You guys were just talking about Pensacola Beach and Mike Champo and all these things. And it's just serendipitous that I attended those same Orlando fire conferences. And I remember taking a forcible entry with Mike Champo. And it just sparked those memories from early on in my career.
Nice. Eric's a great guy.
Oh, yeah. You're in Ontario, is that right?
Yeah.
Nice.
The weather's actually pretty good today.
You a NHL fan?
I'll watch it if it's on, but I don't follow any teams. It's not a major part of my life.
Gotcha. I asked because I'm a hockey player myself, and the Florida Panthers are doing really well this season. So
yeah, it was always funny that Florida ended up getting hockey teams, right?
Yeah, right.
Cool, man. Well, you want to get started?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
Okay. Well, we always kick off with where you grew up and a bit about your family. So tell me about that.
I grew up in Miami, like Hollywood Beach kind of area, Fort Lauderdale. I'm one of four siblings. My dad owned his own appliance shop, and my mom was basically a stay-at-home mom. She worked some secretarial jobs here and there. School was good. I did well in school, not my favorite thing, which is kind of why I got into the fire service. You know, didn't want to do a traditional 9-to-5 or necessarily go get a 4-year degree and all that stuff. So my senior year of high school, I did an explorers program, which is basically go to school, you know, knock out your basic credits and then go explore some type of career. And that was the fire service for me. So immediately fell in love with it. Saw that I could do something where I'm not stuck behind a desk. I get to help people and be impactful in an everyday situation. So right out of high school, went to EMT, fire, got my medic, and then was on the job by the time I was 21.
What was the first exposure to the fire service, though? Like, what brought it on your radar as an option?
When I applied for that Explorers program, it was kind of one on the list, maybe, you know, go work in the hospital, go work at a restaurant, go for the police department. And for me, fire just kind of called to me. I didn't have any family or anything in the service, but I really saw that it was being able to help people was something I was always passionate about. And I saw that as a quick way to get into a career and start making a difference. So first couple shifts doing the ride alongs and all, just, loved the brotherhood, loved everything they were doing. So just dove head first into it.
What about sports growing up?
Grew up playing basketball, hockey, baseball. Hockey was probably my biggest sport. Played travel and stuff for a while. Still played to this day, but, not much further than high school.
And you were into skateboarding and surfing?
Skateboard, surf. I teach paddleboarding. I'm big into jiu-jitsu nowadays, weightlifting, kettlebells, all that kind of stuff.
Do you get waves where you're at?
Not too much. That's kind of why I got into paddleboarding, because, you can go out there and just cruise around. And then, even when it's small waves, you can catch something on those big boards. So we get waves, when there's storms and stuff.
You got into fire service pretty young, but what other jobs did you do before that?
Before that, I worked, Winn-Dixie was my first job. I did some electrician work for a friend's dad, just kind of helping him out. And then a job I really enjoyed prior to the fire service was a company called Funky Fish. And it was basically like a summer swim ocean camp. We teach the kids how to boogie board, how to snorkel, all that kind of stuff. And then on Fridays, we'd go out on the boat and take them like free diving. So that was really enjoyable. And I did that probably 2 years prior to the fire service. Got on at 21, and that's what I did up until 2 or 3 years ago.
Did you work as a medic at all, though, when you got your ticket, or did you just go straight to fire?
I had all my schooling done, so I had my EMT, fire, and medic. The first department I got hired at was a smaller BLS department, so worked there for a year and a half or so, and then got hired at a bigger department in the area, which was a full ALS transport department. Worked as a medic for about 10 years.
What was the academy experience like for you?
I went to Broward Fire Academy down in South Florida, and it was great. It was a hard work. You get challenged every day, and it's something I kind of see now in our society. We don't have a lot of coming of age rituals almost. And for me, like a lot of people, military or some type of service where you get challenged in a group of people, it really made me rise to the occasion and set me up to have a good career where, I wasn't afraid of challenge. I knew how to dig deep within myself, which obviously as a fireman, sometimes you got to find that little spark inside you to keep searching or to keep working. So it was a great experience.
Any interest in the smoke divers program? You've looked into that?
I did. I had a lot of buddies of mine that did the program. I never did it myself, but recommend anybody giving it a shot if they're in the fire service and they want to level themselves up. Smoke divers is where it's at.
And you mentioned Eric Wheaton and conferences and that in your area. So were you pretty regularly going to those, or are you seeking things out like that?
When I first started my fire service career, I had a good crew, and we used to go to conferences like every year. So probably the first 4 or 5 years at that bigger department, we were going as a crew. Orlando Fire Conference, Pensacola Beach Fire Conference, Atlanta Fire Conference, all the things.
Were there any parts of the job that really sparked your interest? Were there specific roles that you found fascinating?
I forget what this one class is called. I forget what it was called, but it was basically a gut check for you as a fireman. So it was like a big group, like fitness training. Obviously we were searching and doing all the fireman stuff, but it was more about the mental aspect of it. And they designed the class to, push you to your physical limit, and then see what you were made of and see if you had positive self-talk, if you could calm yourself, in a bad situation, skills to do so. It's not as easy when you're in a tough spot to just calm yourself if you don't have practical tools to do that. And that's something I teach about a lot nowadays is how the nervous system works and how your breathing affects whether you're going more into that fight or flight or if you're calming the body down. So that got sparked into me before I was even into the mental aspect of the job and understanding how mentally taxing this job could be. So that experience was great. Getting pushed to my physical limit and then having someone coach me, hey, like, what are you doing with your breath right now? What are the thoughts in your mind right now? Are you wanting to quit? How can you change that? And then, like I said, the breath is a big thing I like to share about now, that it changed my life. And couple of years after that, I got out of the fire service 2 or 3 years ago after dealing with some PTSD. And when I, asked for help, I got sent to the medical system, which is, normal. And I was pretty much just prescribed a bunch of medications and, given this label of you have PTSD. But what really sparked inside of me is what are the practical things? What are the tools I can do to fortify myself and become more resilient from these traumatic things I've been through? So that's kind of why I wanted to speak to you today. Is I've been in the past couple of months starting to speak out and share my story, because getting into the fire service, there wasn't much talk about the mental health side of things, and that is changing. It's changing a lot, but I don't see the service giving our guys the skills and actual tools that can help protect us from these inevitabilities of these calls we run. So that's really the message I'm on now, is trying to give people skills. I teach something I like to say, skills before pills. So what are the things we can do? This job is inherently stressful, traumatic. The statistics are not good. You're more likely to die by suicide than in the line of duty. When I first found that out, that's crazy. And then you look into the divorce rates, the alcoholism, domestic violence, all these things that in my eyes come from us repressing and not dealing with the traumas of the job. We think showing any vulnerability is a sign of weakness. And that's what I did for 12 years. I was the tough guy. I saw all the hard charging, lieutenants, all the guys I looked up to. They never cried. They never showed any emotion. They never let me in to know, hey, I'm struggling with this, or, my spouse and I aren't doing so well. I have a hard time communicating. And I did that tough guy act, and it bit me in the ass. I got to a place where I was suicidal. I was having panic attacks every morning when I'd get the keys for the box. I got to a place where I was like, I can't do this anymore. And then it was kind of like I had to pull that ripcord and seek help. But I think so much of it is preventable. If people in probationary school were really, hit with the hard reality of how tough this job is, and then explain, here are some positive coping strategies you can use, as opposed to alcohol, repression, all the things that a lot of us do in the service. I think if we don't change as a culture, you're going to have less and less people able to do the job. So sharing my story and teaching a little bit about what I know, I hope it sparks anybody in the service or anybody looking to get into the service to take the mental aspect serious. You got to be a good fireman. You got to be able to pull hose and force entry and vent a roof, all those things. But if you don't have a strategy for dealing with the inevitabilities of the job, it's going to get you one day.
Are you aware of Rick George? That course you're mentioning sounds like The Courage Within. He ran a program like that.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Rick George. I don't think that was the class I took. I wish I could remember it. Yeah, along those lines. Yeah, he's a similar story, right? Like badass guy. And then one day it's just the repression ain't working no more. And now you can't put your mask on without going into a panic. I didn't have the same thing with the mask, but it was, similar. I thought, I'm great. I'm doing great. I love the job. Best job in the world. And then it's burnout, right? We all do these jobs, and the chronic sleep deprivation, the chronic stress, the diet's not the best. We're drinking coffee in the middle of the night to keep going, all these things. It eventually it wears on you. So like Rick George, it was, I was doing great until I wasn't. And then I didn't have anybody above me to kind of relate or to give me practical tools. So I was kind of, for a year and a half there, just in that victim mindset. I guess I'm screwed up. I guess I got to take these pills. How am I going to get back on the job? And then now 3 years into dealing with it, I realized and I learned, I don't know if you're familiar with this idea, the body keeps the score. The issues are in the tissues. So it wasn't until I actually started to head on address the traumas that I had through body-based techniques. Something I like to do a lot is called TRE. It's trauma release exercises, and it's basically a technique to stimulate your body to release stored emotion. So something like that is a skill that once you learn it and once you understand how this process works, if I would have been shown that as a probationary fireman, I maybe wouldn't have coped with alcohol as much as I would have. Maybe I would have been, oh man, I just ran this bad call on a pediatric. Okay, I need to go do something that is a positive coping strategy to where I can express this out of my system to where I can come back and be fit for service and show up on the next call and be present. It's such a privilege to be the guy or gal who gets called to somebody's worst day, right? And a lot of the burnout and PTSD, it's a hardening. We've dealt with so much shit that we put this armor on and we don't let anything affect us anymore. But in doing so, we shut our hearts off. And if you don't have your heart and you're responding to someone in a crisis, you're not going to be effective. So that's kind of the message I'm trying to get out there is we're not doing a good job in this field of dealing with the inherent stresses of the job. The statistics bear that out. So we need to start addressing these things and finding positive ways to deal with our stress.
Yeah, there's a great video on YouTube. It's an excerpt from Johan Hari's TED Talk about the root of addiction is disconnection.
Yeah, you're trying to soothe yourself, and the things that are easy to grab, video games, alcohol, pornography, all these things, they're poison essentially, right? But it helps you in the short term. Just sounding the alarm, because like I said, I got into this job when I was young, and it was, you're going to see crazy stuff. You're going to get to do cool things. And I was all about that. I was on our TRT team. I did rope rescues, trench rescues, all these things. And I didn't realize that, okay, you can do those things, but you have to do some work on the back end to keep yourself functional and fit for service.
Were the mental struggles you were having, can you tie them back to any specific calls? Or is this something that crept up on you over time? And did you recognize it as, say, just anxiety or just depression, and you didn't realize it was more all-encompassing?
I mean, I had bad calls, over my 12 years, which anybody who's been in the service for a few years, like, you're going to get them. It's the nature of the job. My first call working at that BLS department was a young man, not much older than myself at the time, crossing a major intersection on his bicycle, got hit. I was first on scene. The guy had a full evisceration, so, guts out on the floor, died on scene. And that was my first real traumatic call. And no blame to my lieutenants or the people I was involved with, but we did what most guys do in that situation. You did the best you can, clean up, wash your gear, and you go about your day like nothing happened. The next day, we all went out, had some drinks. I like to talk about the dark humor in the fire service, which is a great skill. To be able to laugh and make light of things is a positive thing. But if you're doing that as a way to repress and not deal with the sadness or the anger or the frustration or the helplessness underneath, that's going to be detrimental long term. So we went out, we had drinks, made some jokes, and then you're back on shift the next day to do it again. That was kind of my introduction to the realities of the job. And then that behavior was what was modeled for me. At the next department I went to, bigger department, same type of thing. That's kind of the thing I want to stress to people is this job is tough and you have to have positive coping skills to do it. And what is the norm in the service? Repression, tough guy act, alcohol. We got to do better because we need to have capable first responders going forward.
Were the medications that you were put on, did they help in any way? Were they a short-term solution? Were they a bridge to allow you to cope to get to other things that were better long-term?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not big on medication, but I definitely, obviously being a paramedic, medication can be life-saving, and I understand that. It was helpful for me to settle some of that anxiety, but it wasn't until I took responsibility for myself and started to find, what is a skill, something like breath work or the TRE or an ice bath or sauna or journaling. What are skills I can do when I'm starting to feel stressed or down to empower myself? So I see the medication as a way to bridge that gap for people. But a lot of this stuff is preventable. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So it shouldn't take 10 years of me dealing with all this stuff to get to a crisis point, to then get put on medication, to then start to search, oh, what are the skills I can do? This is the inevitability of this job, guys. If you're not doing the stuff to take care of yourself, you're going to end up on medication at some point. And if you're going to be reliant on the medication, you're going to be stuck in a victim mindset that the only thing that can fix you is this pill. And that is not a positive long-term strategy. I think medications are a good bridge, but until you take responsibility for yourself and find positive ways to deal with your stress, you're just going to be on that hamster wheel, increasing dosages, try this new med. I don't see it as a long-term solution.
Was talk therapy a part of it all?
Yeah, talk therapy is helpful for sure. It's crazy that I had to get to the point where I was in a crisis mode to start to express my feelings, right? But that's kind of this vulnerability piece that I like to speak about. Is in the service, we see vulnerability as a weakness. It's a strength. If you're a real man and you can't express some sadness or some quote unquote weak emotion, how much of a man are you really? Flipping the script on that, encouraging people to open up to where you don't have to speak to a therapist when you're in a crisis. If you have just a good friend on the crew that you can just speak openly and honestly with, or if you have a spouse or a family member, anybody. The point is, if you're keeping it locked in, it's going to cause you issues in the future. Another one of my quotes is, the antidote to repression is expression. So simply getting it out of your system, whether it's journaling, whether it's sharing your thoughts with a friend, those things are going to be protective long-term.
What were you exposed to that opened your mind to alternatives to medication or things to do in addition to medication to help yourself?
It was desperation, honestly. When I first sought help, I was placed on light duty. I think I did light duty like 6-7 months. So I'm still around the station. I'm still wearing the uniform. I'm still hearing the tones go off, which was very challenging and triggering for me. Couldn't really turn off that amygdala, hijack that fight or flight response. I was still in the environment. So I'm taking these medication, docs telling me you're going to get better. If it doesn't, we'll revisit it, maybe up your dose. You do that for a while, and I'm still having panic attacks at the station. I'm still finding myself avoiding certain areas in the district because they triggers me, and then I have to go through that whole thing. So it wasn't until I started looking for tools that I started to find some relief. So these alternative methods that I speak about and share, it was pure desperation. I kind of started with meditation. That was when I was still on the job, learning how to do something like yoga nidra, which is basically just a breathing practice to downregulate the nervous system. That allowed me to get back to sleep after, you go for a call in the middle of the night, you come back, you're all wound up. How do you get back to sleep? So that was the first kind of foray into alternative practices, and it was helpful. That allowed me to get back to sleep. So once I saw that the medication I was still in a bad place, I was still suicidal, I was still having panic attacks, I was already kind of hip to the idea that there was other ways. And then it just became a search. TRE was the first one that really cracked me open. Like I mentioned before, it's trauma release exercises. Discovered by a man named David Berselli, and he was basically a journalist in war zones. And he noticed that, say, after a bombing or some type of incident, people would intuitively go into crying or shaking or moving in a way that he noticed the people who would do that would move that traumatic energy out of their bodies. And the people who kept it all in were the ones who would have issue going forward. So with that recognition, he developed a technique. Basically through 15-20 minutes of movement, you're able to stimulate that release in your body. And it's kind of like if you ever seen like a lion chase a gazelle and the gazelle gets to safety, they'll go into this spasmodic, their body shakes. It's all that energy that they're releasing. And once they do that, they go back to normal like nothing ever happened. There's a book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And that's basically the idea where animals, which humans, we're animals, we evolved from animals, have this innate ability to release that trauma. Us being human, we have a higher level mind. So we can kind of override that process and eventually that trauma gets stuck. So once I practice the TRE, your body literally goes into an involuntary shaking. And as you're shaking, keeping in mind this idea that the body keeps the score, I would have old calls that I didn't even remember start to come up into my consciousness. And once that's coming up, remembering that the antidote to repression is expression, you have that memory shaken up now that you repressed so long ago. Now you can simply express it, whether you're screaming in anger, you're crying out of sadness, whatever it is. That is how we release these emotions. And then you can move on in a more integrated way. So long story short, medication was helpful for me, but it wasn't until I tried these alternative methods, and those are what gave me the relief, that I realized that, oh, okay, it's the skills versus pills thing. What tools do I have to express this trauma? TRE doesn't work for everybody. I teach people different breathwork techniques that are aimed around the same thing, heightening that stress response in the body to bring up these old stored emotions. And once they come up, then you can release them. So that process becomes a skill that you get better and better at. I kind of envision it like if that was the norm in the fire service or, police, military, anybody who deals with these things, traumatic situations can become galvanizing events for crews if we're properly dealing with these traumas. If we're not just repressing and acting like everything's fine, and now everybody's suffering in their own little silos, we need to face these things head on so we can learn from them and become stronger from them.
Yeah, it's ironic that we know what the worst that could happen is if we keep dealing with things in an unhealthy way, yet we keep doing the unhealthy things. And for people that don't know what the worst, quote unquote, could happen if they try these alternatives, they don't know what the result is. So what's the hurt? What's the risk? How could it be worse than what you're already doing? So why not try it and see if it's different and have the experience?
And that's the thing of skills. The skills are empowering. I hit a crisis point and I have no tools to deal with this. And if you're in that situation, you're going to be sent to the medical system. And the narrative is, well, you have this and this issue, so here's a pill for it. And that narrative is very disempowering. Statistics bear it out. We're not handling our trauma well. What are your skills? What can you do to empower yourself so that you can be fit for service? You can show up to that 911 call and still have your heart for these people who are in a bad spot.
It's very similar just to fire calls. We get very much stuck in stories where we could keep going to fires and keep burning houses down until someone finally says, hey, why don't we try something different?
Yeah.
And then we try the different thing and we're more successful. But we really just get stuck in doing things the way we've always done it, and we don't think about the alternatives. How quickly did things start to shift for you when you started trying alternative methods where you suddenly realized how much space all this was taking up inside of you?
That first experience with TRE, it changed my life. That's why I think these body-based techniques can be revolutionary for the fire service, because I had read the book, The Body Keeps the Score. I was starting to try to understand what the hell is going on with me. Why am I so messed up? But it wasn't until I had the felt experience of a cathartic release that came with these memories of a hanging I went to, that I hadn't consciously thought about for years. And I thought I was quote unquote fine, which is what most people in the fire service say. It was a good shift. I'm fine. Everything's fine. It wasn't until my body showed me that I wasn't fine that I had that epiphany, whatever you want to call it, where it was heartbreaking because I knew I had a lot of work to do, but it gave me a path forward that I could empower myself with. And it's 3 years since I've been out of the fire service, and I still struggle with anxiety. I have some panic attacks occasionally, but every time I get on a podcast or share my story, it's a healing experience. I continue on a daily basis to do breath work, these practices that I teach about now. Every day is a little bit better. So I'm not telling people, hey, you do one breath work session and everything's fine and dandy. This is an ongoing thing. You know, life is suffering. So you can either let it pile on you, or you work through it. And as you do it, you get stronger and stronger, and then you're able to deal with more. It isn't a quick fix, but it gives you some skills to empower yourself going forward.
Would it be best if we even just got rid of the whole systems check or question, am I fine, am I not fine, as the stimulus or the prompt, the catalyst to do something about it? Whereas you can just have a common practice. You go to the call, whether or not you think you're fine or not, you just do the thing. Because maybe we're not the best judge of, am I fine, am I not fine, or if I feel okay in these first few minutes, and then life gets busy, and then you're 3 days, a week, 2 weeks later, and you don't even realize that whatever mood you're experiencing is because of what was before. You're not linking it to it anymore. So if you just did the thing every time you went to something that was possibly difficult, you would just be letting it off, and you wouldn't know whether it would have affected you or not because you've already released it. Is that fair?
Yeah, for sure. I was speaking to this guy, Dave, the other day, and he told me it's not if, it's when. With these calls, it's inevitable. If you're running traumatic call after traumatic call and you're not doing something to release it, it's going to get you at some point. We do daily maintenance on the truck, right? After you run a fire, you're cleaning your hose, you're doing all the things to make sure your truck's back in order. You do that every call. You don't neglect to roll the hose or drain it or repack it. So why do you think you can run a call that it's not a normal situation and then think you're just fine? You know, you need to have at least the top 3 skills for dealing with trauma or stress. When I bring that question to people, a lot of people, they're just crickets. What do you do after a shitty call? I don't know. Go have a drink at the bar, go work out hard at the gym. That's only going to get you so far. What are you doing to actually deal with the stuff? And that's where I didn't even understand that I had the body keeps the score. You can hear that and understand, okay, stress lives in the body. But until you experience some type of release through a breath practice, through the TRE, it's just concepts, right? It's like, yeah, stress lives in the body. Okay. We got to put our people through these practical experiences to where they can no longer think that they're just fine. Like you said, you run the call, you come back, life gets busy, a couple days go by, you buried it down, and then you just keep going on your day. But like that hanging call that popped up on me 8 years later when I'm doing this technique, I didn't realize that was running in my subconscious. But how much was that influencing my behavior? How much was that making me be more volatile or angry than I realized? So that's the challenge, I think, is a lot of us in the service are these hard chargers. We're type A. We signed up to do this job because we want to help people, but we don't recognize that you're not just a fireman. You're a human. You're a human first. So I didn't even realize it until probably 2 or 3 years out of getting out of the service. I didn't start to recognize how what I had done for 12 years was not normal life. You go to shift, you see a couple dead people, you might run a fire or an MVA, or you see these things that become so commonplace because, well, that's the job, that it's easy to just shove it down, right? Because you're going to do it again tomorrow. But it wasn't until I got out and started having just a normal civilian life where I'm not running 911 calls that I started to recognize, like, holy shit, a lot of these things I did, it's not normal life. Doing those things, you're gonna have residual effects. So the piece I really see to make a shift in the culture is, how do you get people to really not just think about the idea the body keeps the score? How do you get them to experience it to where they're not able to run a call and then think, I'm fine, it doesn't affect me? You know what I mean? It's, okay, I ran this call and I have these skills to deal with it. So just like I'm going to clean my truck after this fire, I'm going to go and take care of myself and do something aimed at releasing this trauma. And there's a million ways to do it. But the point is, we haven't addressed that in the fire service. I don't know about in Ontario, in your area. Here in America, we're starting to talk about it. It's a lot more commonplace, but we're just talking about the concepts and we're not getting people to do the actual skill of self-regulation, of releasing the trauma. So the status quo kind of stays the same, right? We all understand, oh yeah, trauma, PTSD, but hey, I'm fine. It might be that other guy, but I'm fine.
It's interesting that the TRE, and it makes me think of yoga too, because I've had these cathartic energy releases through many practices. Yoga in particular, for sure. You get into certain positions and you realize, oh my God, where's that coming from? Right? Something just wells up in you. And it's interesting how those body movements, and I'm really interested to look into the TRE, how they're different than just doing a workout in the gym. Because that's still body movement, right? It's still exercise. But why is it different? Perhaps the TRE and things like yoga, that's where they are a great gateway to start to venture into figuring this out, as opposed to talk therapy, even breath work. They're already exercising. Get them to do different body movements just seems like exercise. If it's very specific to releasing trauma, then they would have that experience versus trying to get them to do something that's completely outside of what they're used to. And then perhaps then the gateway is, wow, that really was powerful. And then, maybe then the cold plunge comes in, maybe then the breath work comes in, and then finally the meditation after that. And this is maybe where perhaps this kind of thing is more helpful than even just doing the, we thought talking it through, which, like you said, expression is the antidote to repression. So talking is beneficial. In all my years of peer support and doing post-incident discussions, like I've seen great benefit for myself and for others. But I guess what I'm driving at is perhaps that's not the immediate thing to sit in the group and to talk. Maybe it is these body movements that are in the moment when you're doing them, it's very linked to what you're used to doing. It just seems like a workout. You're not directly linking it to, okay, we're going to sit down and face each other and talk about these things, which makes people uncomfortable. It's almost like just fooling ourselves into doing something that's helpful. I guess that's what I'm driving at.
What comes up for me in this piece, it really helped me to start to understand trauma and these releases is if you look at it through the nervous system, basically. So our nervous system, you have your sympathetic, your fight or flight, or your stress response, right? Then we have parasympathetic, relaxation, rest and digest. Trauma is able to be released when the nervous system is able to go into a parasympathetic mode. But polyvagal theory is Stephen Porges. He talks about safety. The nervous system's always looking for safety. So if there's danger, the body's revving up to fight, whatever the issue is. When you go into that relaxation parasympathetic mode, the body will not stay there unless it feels safe. And when you're doing something like yoga, you're down regulating that nervous system. When the body's calm, these things can start to come up. But if you haven't experienced the process and how, okay, this thing's coming up, let me release it, and then the body's able to come back to homeostasis, you get stuck doing things that just rev you up. So when I first started trying to do the meditation, I couldn't sit in a public place and close my eyes without getting the alarm bells going off. Someone's going to come attack me from behind or one of these things. And they call it amygdala hijack. The fear center of your brain gets hypersensitive due to overexposure to stress. So now stillness and relaxation become a danger signal. So we keep ourselves in things that keep us up. It's beneficial to, after a bad call, go get a hard workout at the gym, but that's keeping you in that sympathetic state. And the trauma release comes when you're able to calm yourself. But that is dangerous to the body, right? When I'm sitting trying to do meditation, my body's going danger, danger, danger. If I don't practice calming myself in that situation, I'm just going to get up and start moving. So like you said, yoga and these other practices, built into the practice is a parasympathetic state of the nervous system. We're calming ourselves down. And that's something that we, as type A hard chargers, we dismiss it. That can't be effective. But when you understand it through the scope of you're allowing your nervous system to regulate itself, it allows you to look at something like an ice bath. I see that as a nervous system exercise as well. You get into the ice bath, you're going to initially have that sympathetic shock where your body charges up. And the skill in the ice bath is, can you downregulate your breath and calm your nervous system? And as you get better and better at doing that, that is the same thing that now you pass maybe an intersection where you ran a bad call and you recognize that stress response in yourself, and your body, tenses up and you start to have these memories of this call. Can you calm yourself in that moment and understand those things that are going on underneath the surface? And then as you do that, you get better and better at recognizing, oh man, this call reminds me of this other thing. And then it's a process. How can I express it out? Can I speak to someone? Can I journal it? But polyvagal theory and understanding the nervous system, it gave me a path forward. I recognize that PTSD is a dysregulation of the nervous system. You're stuck in that fight or flight mode. And until you learn ways of regulating your nervous system, you're going to be stuck in that perpetual fight or flight. And it's not a good thing long term.
Do we have a fear, though, that if we downregulate, we won't be able to upregulate again when we're needed to?
Possibly, but it's yin and yang, right? Like, you can't be a hard charger all the time. It's a necessary component. You have to work hard and then you have to rest. If you're not resting enough, the body's going to break down. So yeah, I'm sure some people have fear about that. And with a lot of this stuff, I was the hero. I was the tough guy. Everybody comes to me for the issue. And now I'm having to sit here and cry like a broken little boy. And at first it's like, I don't want to do that. I'm vulnerable. That's unsafe. But once you do these things, then you're able to come back even better by dealing with my own shit, by feeling my emotions, by going there myself. Now, when I show up for this person, I'm able to actually be in their shoes. I'm able to understand and have empathy. And that only makes you a better first responder, right? So that's this whole piece. Vulnerability is not a weakness. Vulnerability is a strength. If you think you're just the tough guy and you don't feel nothing bad, you're fooling yourself. You can think you're doing that, and then how's your marriage going? How is your relationship with your kids? Do people like being around you? We can think that going into this relaxation mode is unnecessary because it's going to make us soft or weak. But it's actually the opposite. The deeper you can go into that relaxation mode, the higher you're going to be able to go up into the other way. And then it's, can I toggle back and forth? It's like surfing, right? You're not going to be all the way on the nose the whole time. You got to step back to the back of the board and find that balance. So that's the same thing with mental health. There's a time to fireman up and be a tough guy. There's a rent rescue going on or something. I don't need to hear about your feelings. But on the back end, let's not neglect that. And that's the piece that's been missed in our culture. It's, we are the people. We're the ones that people call. It's not helpful for me to be crying or feeling sad when we're working a pediatric code, but I'm a human. And if I can go into that mode and get the job done, that's the job. I got to do that. But to think there is not repercussions, or to think that you're fine afterwards, you're fooling yourself. And like I said, that's what I did for a long time until I hit a point where I could no longer say I was fine, because my body, and this is where PTSD is, once you understand it's a dysregulation of the nervous system, my sleep was messed up, my digestion was messed up, I was gaining weight, I would have angry outbursts. All these things come from your nervous system being dysregulated. So it's like your body is telling you. That's what burnout is. Compassion fatigue. How many medics, and I got to that point, that was a big signal for me where I didn't give a shit about the patient I was running. I was like, come on, let's get in the truck, let's go. That should be a sign to you that, well, damn, I'm losing my heart. That's what burnout is. You lose that compassion, you lose that empathy. We almost see it as a badge of honor, at least when I was in, and I would look up to the guys I would see. It was like, the tougher the guy was, the more emotionless he was, the more cool, calm, and collected he was on a scene, the more I respected him. But a lot of those guys, when I started doing my own work and recognizing it, I would see that, no, they just shut their heart off. So yeah, you can show up as a robot and do all the job, but you really don't have any compassion for this patient. And our job should first be about being a human. I remember one call I had where a guy got rear-ended. He was pinned to the dash, both femurs broken, and he's stuck. And it's one of those calls where, all right, once we release this guy, he's probably going to die. It's not looking good. And I was first medic on scene, so I'm there talking to him. I start the IVs, I do all the medical stuff. And then I had 45 minutes to just sit with the guy. And he didn't give a shit about my medic skills. He didn't care if I was good at search and rescue or any of these things. This was a man who was facing death, and he needed someone to show up as a human. That is, a big component of our job. So if you keep telling yourself you're fine, and you just put that steel man armor on and you shut your heart off, that's not helpful to serving our community.
Yeah, so probably a better habit is to not, again, use the am I fine, am I not as the litmus test of whether I need to take action or not. It's more of maybe the focus should be on the calls. I just ran that. I need to balance that out.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, I need to balance that out. Just that mentality, that thought of I need to balance that out. And then you just take action to balance it out.
Yeah, no, I think that's it.
It almost takes it out of your own, how is it attached to my ego or my identity? It doesn't matter. It's just like that happened. I need to balance it out.
When you say that, it comes to mind, it would almost take that choice point away from people to where right now it's like, I run a bad call. Oh, I got to go do this stuff. AKA I'm weak. I can't handle it. But if it was just normalized to where it doesn't have to be an amputation or some super quote unquote traumatic call. The job is stressful. If you don't have positive coping mechanisms, it's going to catch up to you eventually. I've had these discussions with the different people and no one's brought that up yet to just, this is what we do. You had a 24-hour shift. There's a lot of stress from that shift that you incurred. And yes, it's the job. Yes, you got to show up and do it. But hey, now on the back end, it's necessary to do something to regulate your nervous system. So you're not weak. You can't handle the job. It's just normal daily maintenance, right? We do our truck checks every morning, do a mental health check every morning, do a mental health check every post shift. Doing these discussions, that I'm fine thing comes up a lot. It keeps reoccurring to me that if you're saying you're fine, that should be a warning signal. This guy, Dave, I was just speaking to the other day, he said with his crew, he doesn't let people say, I'm fine. If a guy comes in, I'm fine. Okay, well, tell me more. You're either great and you had a great day off, or you're not. And either way is fine, but let's have a discussion. Let's be honest and vulnerable with each other. Doing that is going to fortify you for when that shitty call does come, because now you've practiced it as a crew to where you're just telling each other how you feel. You're being honest with stuff. So when that shitty call does come, it's not the first time you're sitting in front of this guy and opening up, because then it becomes awkward and then it's real easy to just go, I'm fine, I'm good.
So at what point did your desire to help others, which got you into the job in the first place, when did that start surfacing where you wanted to help others and teach others about this? And how did you go about it?
I did the medications. I did the medical route, what I was given through workers' comp. I was still desperate. And then I started finding these other techniques. And, it was a godsend. I was like, why didn't anybody tell me these things? Why didn't someone explain this to me when I was 21 years old and got on the job? Why, when I had that first traumatic bike accident, why didn't my lieutenants and chiefs show me positive coping strategies? Once I started to find some relief with these techniques, and then I realized how they're free techniques. I can teach somebody the breath work. I can teach them the TRE. And once you understand how it works, now you have that skill in your back pocket whenever you need it. So obviously I had to get myself together. And once I got to a point where I had some relief through these techniques, it became, man, I wish someone would have told me this when I started. I had all the intentions of doing a 30-year career. I never imagined myself doing anything else, but life happened. So now I'm to the point where I see the desperate need in the service. And if I can help one fireman recognize that you need to do something to cope with these skills so you don't have to do what I did and become an alcoholic, nearly lose your marriage, be suicidal, lose your career. That's what I'm motivated about now. And it's become a passion to share this stuff simply because I wish someone would have told me. And every time I do a talk and I get someone who reaches out to me and, expresses some gratitude or says, oh man, I didn't know that there was ways to release this stuff without having to get on medications or without having to go talk to some lady who, isn't on the rig with us, who wasn't there. It makes me feel great. So it's really become a passion now. I do this work with not so much with people in the fire service. That is my goal, to create a cultural shift in the fire service through these techniques, through facing our trauma head on and stop putting our head in the sand. But I'm still in that process. I have an opportunity here in a couple months to go out to Colorado and do some teaching about this, but that'll be the first big department I'm getting into. So I want to do more of this work. As of now, I do it a lot with people who are dealing with stress and are looking for other ways of managing their stress. But yeah, my dream would to be regularly teaching this to firefighters, police, military, anybody in these hero fields. There's skills that can fortify you against the inevitability of the job. That's kind of a message I wish I would have gotten when I first started. This job is traumatic. You're going to see stuff that the average person doesn't see. So you need to have extraordinary skills to cope with it.
So tell me about Conscious Movements and how you got that started.
So Conscious Movements is an umbrella company that I created to teach all these skills. I do personal training. I do stress management coaching. I teach the breath work, the TRE, ice bath, sauna, all these holistic approaches to managing your stress, all these skills that can make you more resilient. So Conscious Movements is just the company to kind of encompass all that. But inside Conscious Movements, I created a Conscious Movements class, which is basically all the movement-based and breath-based skills that I, again, out of desperation, had to learn to regulate myself. I kind of put that into an 1.5-hour long class. I educate about polyvagal theory. I educate about the nervous system. I teach the 3 gears of breathing, which is basically just a format for how you can breathe and how your breath affects your nervous system. So, you can breathe in a more sympathetic state. So in the mouth, into the chest, that's going to rev up that stress response in your body. And you can breathe in a parasympathetic state like babies do, in your nose, filling your belly, out through your nose. That type of breath stimulates the vagus nerve, calms the body down, and relaxes the nervous system. So in my class, I take people through the 3 gears of breathing, basically. The beginning of the class is what I call working in as opposed to working out. So working in is moving your body while in a parasympathetic dominance of the nervous system. We kind of rev it up through the class. At the end of the class, I get people into that stress response. So high heart rate, breathing heavy, and then I lay you down to a meditation where we walk back through the breath. Ultimately, I'm trying to teach people the skill of self-regulation. So you leave my class, somebody cuts you off, you recognize that stress response, right? So that's another thing is we all have a specific stress response. It might be you sweat, your jaw gets tight, your breathing goes up, maybe you're clenching your hands or your fists. The more aware of that you are, the quicker you can recognize, oh, I'm going into that stress response. And what are the tools I have to shift my nervous system down? Most of us stay in a stress response perpetually. So through the class, I'm trying to expose people to the language of the nervous system. How is your body communicating with you and telling you which state it's in? And then what are the tools, your breath, relaxing your shoulders down, softening these stress responses? What are the tools you can have to shift the state of your nervous system? Once you're able to recognize the state of your nervous system and then you have tools to regulate, that allows you to deal with your stress in a more head-on way. when I first started having issues, I would wake up first thing in the morning and I would be in a stressed breath. No one told me that, hey, dude, if you keep breathing that way, you're revving your nervous system up and it's eventually going to lead to a panic attack. Until I recognized that and started practicing, oh, okay, I wake up, let me calm my shoulders down, let me switch to a first gear of breathing in through my nose, filling my belly. And then I was able to stop myself from having these panic attacks. I had no clue. Conscious Movements class is a class designed to put people through movements to stimulate the nervous system to that stress response, to the relaxation response, and give people a felt sense of what that is when you're in these different states.
You know, so many firefighters will say that they don't do well learning from books or, you know, even from lectures, PowerPoint presentations. They're like, I'm a hands-on person, you know, I need to get out and I need to do it. And they aren't necessarily linking what we're talking about here to that. And I think that was one of the key concepts you brought forward is you can understand something logically. You know, someone can tell you and you can hear it, you're intelligent, you understand it. But until you feel better, you don't know you can feel better. Until you have a physical experience of like, oh, this feels drastically different than what my normal is and it feels so good. That's the only thing that's going to spur you to want to do it more.
Yeah. And that's where these body-based techniques can be so revolutionary for the culture because we're firemen. We like to do stuff. A lot of us got into this job so we're not stuck behind a desk, right? We want to go out there, sweat, get our hands dirty, do the thing. And that's the kind of piece that I think we're missing in this mental health PTSD conversation is right now we're doing a lot of talking about it. I think most firemen understand PTSD is a real thing, the statistics, the suicide rates, they understand these things, but we haven't given them, okay, this is an actual practice you can go do to deal with this thing. That is the piece I'm trying to really trumpet. We've talked about it enough. Okay, let's put people through this skill. Let's put people through something that is going to let them experience this idea that the body keeps the score. It wasn't until I did the TRE and had this emotional release where all of a sudden I'm thinking about this really traumatic hanging call that I went to 8 years ago. I didn't even recognize that was still in my consciousness. That was with all the book knowledge I had and the understanding of what PTSD was. But that's a distinction I make between knowledge and wisdom, right? Knowledge is in your head. Wisdom is in your body. You felt it, you know it. And once you have that wisdom, there's no going back. I can't fool myself anymore and say I'm fine. I thought I was fine, but my body told me a different story. So as firemen, we're a culture of doers. Let's stop talking about PTSD. Let's put people through these skills as a mandatory thing coming in on probationary school. So you get out of your probation and you've tried 2, 3, 4 different techniques. Maybe one of them really works for you. Maybe the TRE you didn't like. That's fine. Whatever it is that allows you to tap into that intelligence in your body and allows you to feel that calming of the nervous system, right? Because that's essentially what we're doing. When we have these things stuck, it makes the nervous system just rev. You're high idling and you never are able to come down to that relaxation. I mean, it wasn't until I started doing these techniques to where I felt what it feels like to be calm. How many firemen can't go to a restaurant and sit with their back to the door? And we say that as like it's a cool thing. And really what that is your amygdala is in overdrive. Your body is constantly picking up danger and you're unable to come into that relaxation mode. And that is going to eventually, burn you out. But it wasn't until I felt it in my body that these ideas started to really sink in.
How do people reach out to you if they want to get a hold of you and learn more about this?
Best place I direct people is my website, conscious-movements.com. I have a little bio about myself. I share about all the things I do. And then the thing I really like to get people on there to check out is I have a library of books, all the books that changed my life. And you can kind of go through the books and it's almost in order. I read The Body Keeps the Score, and then that opened me up to Gabor Mate's When the Body Says No. And then from there, I got on to Peter Levine and somatic experiencing. And so if anybody listens to this conversation and they're interested, go read, go check out these books, go educate yourself on this topic. And then there's also a lot of videos on there that talk about the nervous system, talk about polyvagal theory. I got some videos on there that shows this cathartic release that I'm talking about. And there's like a polar bear. He gets tranquilized basically, and you can watch the polar bear go through this energetic release where it's like shaking and it's doing like a breath thing, and then it calms down, and then the polar bear is fine. Go on there, check out these videos, look into the books. I really want to push the message that you're a human first. This job requires extraordinary things from you. At the end of the day, you're just a human. So you're not immune to these things. All these high-level situations tax your nervous system and push you into a more sympathetic dominance. So if you don't have a work in practice, if you don't have something that brings you into that parasympathetic state, you're going to burn out eventually, and it's going to lead to PTSD. You're going to have sleep problems, sexual dysfunction, digestive issues, all these things. Check out my website, Conscious-Movements. I have all my social media on there. I am really enjoying sharing my story and talking about these things. So I would love to, any other person that wants to have these conversations, I'm all about it. I'm just a normal old Joe, so I take phone calls from whoever wants to give me a call and talk about these things. So feel free to reach out. Take care of yourself, guys. We need people to do these jobs, but we got to do a better job of doing the necessary mental work that comes along with the physical aspect of the job, right? You got to be physically fit, but you got to be mentally fit as well.
It's awesome, man. You're doing great work, and I hope you keep going.
Appreciate that, man.